Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Dublin to Denver podcast with me, Colum Cronin. And in what will prove to be something of a training camp preview, look ahead. Some of the teams are in training camp at the moment, but the Broncos going much later than others, which is coinciding with my holidays as I venture off to Scandinavia. But to look ahead to training camp, to I suppose a potential roster battles, maybe cut candidates, trade candidates. I am joined, as always, by my friend, colleague, and co-host Stuart Roach. Stuart, how are you doing, sir?
Colum, I'm doing very well. I know the Sheriff is very excited by this camp battle preview. Let's hope we can live up to Sheriff's enthusiasm. I'd just like to, before we start, Colum, I'd like to apologise to any American listeners we have for last night's shambles of World Cup final. And I do imagine a lot of Americans who might be listening and in general are kind of going, people criticize American football for being stop-start and boring. Really? Did you watch any of that last night? So, but look, the World Cup's over, Colin, and I think we've got a couple of weeks now before, or probably about 2 weeks before training camp starts proper. As you said, we seem to be starting very, very late. A lot of teams, I think, are kicking that off either today or they've already started. So, we've got a little bit of catching up to do there, but hey, it gives us this opportunity to do a preview because I know you're away off, as you said, Scandinavia, and then I'm not long after you. So this kind of needs to be a bit of a bumper edition, where we'll predict exactly who Broncos fans are going to fall massively in love with after 2 preseason games, and then who gets traded to the New Orleans Saints for a 7th rounder. And isn't promptly never heard of again. So I have my thoughts, Colin, and I'm sure you have your thoughts too on that one.
I can say, Stuart, I think there'll be two things. I think there'll be who the fans fall in love with, right? This year's Kyle Slaughter. Ooh. And there'll be somebody that Denver media members will fall in love with. Will be convinced that this is the be all and end all, and tell you that they're having a great camp, only for him to then not make the 53.
Well, I'm not predicting that he's not going to make the 53, Colin, but I do think Steady's performance in the AFC Championship game has denied quite a lot of hype that would have gone into the off-season, because given Bo's unfortunate ankle injury, perhaps the backup quarterback position would have been giving more attention than even Broncos fans have traditionally given the position. But I don't think even P. Smide's most loyal followers will be able to sell us that dead horse. So unfortunately, that's one particular camp storyline that's died before it even began. So they're gonna have to dig deep to find something else. I mean, maybe the Ellinger versus Stidham thing can be turned into the Broncos version of Steve Young versus Joe Montana, but I kind of doubt it. I'm not gonna lie.
We'll see. Rule nothing out, Stuart. We're only we're now unbelievably. Time in a post-COVID world. I heard somebody say they'd been to Ireland in 2016, 4 years ago. And I said it as a joke, but it kind of resonated. But if you cast your mind back an actual mere 4 years to the summer of 2022, and Montreal, Washington, who, if you believed Broncos media at the time, Stuart, this is the second coming of Rod Smith, mixed with a little bit of Jerry Rice.
Yeah, I'm surprised, Colin, that if Montreal had gotten even a handful of games from the Broncos, he may have made that PFF all 2 decades team, given some of the names that featured on there. I can barely even remember Montreal's Washington column, so that just goes to show you where we're at in regards to in regards to Camp Darlings. So obviously this year's version has got a hell of a lot to live up to if Montreal was anything to go by.
What I can say, Stuart, is he if you remember, he was drafted by us. He proceeded to have an incredible training camp. So much so, one of the lines uttered about him, right, in August of 2022. It's a real thing that was typed and put into the world, Stuart. Quote, just a few months later, it's hard to imagine the Broncos without Washington. End quote.
Oh my gosh. Just another example, folks, that even if that wasn't readily available on the internet through a very simple Google search, Colum does keep receipts. So be very careful with the kind of rubbish that you spout over the next couple of weeks, because in July 2029, Colum's going to come for you with some evidence of some of the crazy stuff that's been said in the coming weeks.
I don't mind people getting excited. I don't mind people hyping it up, but it's when it reaches that level of ridiculous that it is, it's so telling. So he spent that season then, Stuart, right? He ended up he was on special teams. Okay, a year later, after another incredible camp where they tried to give him some sort of WWE type push, as they call it, I believe, in wrestling circles. We released him. He got picked up by the Chiefs, okay, on their practice squad, only to be waived by them, to be in October, to be brought back onto their practice squad, and then he was waived by them in August 24, re-signed to their practice squad, then released on December 30th and re-signed to their practice squad. In February of 2025, Stuart, he signed with the Giants, only to then be released by them in August of that year following camp. And he signed for the DC Defenders on January 14th of this year, and was then released on March 19th. Look, Montreal Washington has played more NFL football than either you or I. The issue is not him. He didn't write that piece. The media did. And I say that just as a caution for some of the nonsense that will be spouted over the next few weeks. Stuart, here's a just before we delve into things, here's a query for you. As we've been podcasting, we've known each other, we've been friends for a while now. Can you guess of the NFL stories that featured, or an NFL? One was Broncos related, and one was NFL story tangentially connected to the NFL, a man synonymous with the NFL, really. Can you guess what two media stories annoyed me more than any others this week?
Whenever you say, Stuart, can you guess, it rarely ends happily. Just so you know, I immediately feel like somebody stepped over my grave, as we say in Ireland. I'll
tell you. You may not have. And once I tell you, I think it'll be very obvious. The first was Colin Cowherd sticking his nose in, and getting involved in the saying he would how much of a better QB Bo Nix is than Lamar Jackson.
Yes.
I don't think there's any need for that. Again, we know why he's doing it, right? And if it was an actual belief, that would be one thing. But Stuart, if you cast your mind back to November of last year, Colin Cowherd was advocating that Sean Payton should trade for a new QB because Bo Nix was broken and beyond repair. And so, again, it's just an example of, like, he knows that there's a lot of hate for Bo Nix in the general, like amongst a lot of NFL media, right? They don't rate him. And he knows that this will rile people up. He doesn't particularly care whether he's right or wrong. It's just about clicks. But it's just an annoying piece that he decided to, make it about Bo. And I think we don't we don't need to be giving any bulletin board material to the Ravens, right? And he has gone and done that, a guy who's supposedly friends with Sean Payton. But anyway, and the second one is and incredibly, and you may not, I don't know if you'll have seen this, an NFL owner, right, or part NFL owner, who is incredibly wealthy, engaging in fake fights in public with a social media influencer. And do you not have enough money? Did you not get enough success? You have more rings than any other starting QB. You're wildly hailed as the best to ever play the position. You could argue that, absolutely. I would argue that, but many people say it. And this is what you spend your time doing. You spend your time like pretending to fight. Not surprised. Your wife decided enough was enough. She was out of there, and she was moving on, and having continuing with her life while you were acting like you were 12 years age. Anyway, those are the things that annoyed me this week. Didn't annoy me for very long, right? All of 5 minutes, and then talking on this podcast. Don't allow media to dictate your life. But I think it's a sign of the time of the year we are in, but also just the media landscape such as it is at the moment.
Yeah, I guess as well, you kind of sort of wonder if Tom Brady's time might not be better spent being available for Mendoza to sort of pick his brains, because as good a prospect as he is, he's still sort of heading into uncharted territory. And I don't know, maybe Tom is constantly in his ear, but that would have been probably what I would have much rather have seen my part owner being used for, rather than pretending to slap some streamer who was it him or was it his brother who actually got slapped properly by Anthony Joshua, who's very much on the descending part of his career. So, look, this is as somebody who would have been a fan of boxing, Colum, and not necessarily his heyday, but it's one of its glory years in sort of the 80s, when you would have had such amazing fighters as Evander Holyfield and Mike Tyson, despite his difficult past. And, then you would have had middleweight divisions with Sugar Ray Leonard and Thomas the Hitman Hearns and the best of all, marvelous Marvin Hagler. What's happened to boxing in particular, I think in the last few years is it's just a step above WWE at this point, and it's sad to see. But anyway, look, we're digressing slightly. Now, I would have been slightly more annoyed by the story which had Knicks, I think, ranked 18th. Was that a recent thing where they kind of polled scouts and coaches and GMs and whatnot, and they again scandalously ranked Knicks in the lower half of NFL starting quarterbacks. That to me is great in the sense that it gives us bulletin board material and not the other way around. Although I'm not really sure how much Colin Cowherd is taken seriously at this point. Colin, he is clearly a Sean Payton plant, and they've been mates for a long time. That's absolutely fine. This is the guy who famously wrote a book about the Dallas Cowboys when he was a Dallas beat reporter, where he literally made up story after story after story, particularly about Troy Aikman. And it's kind of been hard to take him seriously ever since then. So, that would have been something that, as I said, would have been more annoying. There was another thing as well where ESPN valued quarterbacks and what they would give up in trades for them. They sort of valued Bo Nix as worth a first round pick and something else. And then they valued Drake May as 6 first round picks, leaving aside the absurdity of the fact that you're not actually allowed to trade 6 first-round picks. You're not even allowed to trade any more than 3 picks, I think. That is just utterly ludicrous. In regards to Jackson, Colum, I think he had a down year like the way the Ravens did themselves. But as you pointed out, like there's a strong possibility that the Ravens are going to bounce back, and we should consider the likes of themselves, the Chiefs, the Bills, potentially the Bengals, the aforementioned Patriots, despite my reservations about them, and I think they're more likely to be a one-hit wonder than we are last year. These are rivals for the AFC title, so you really don't want to put yourself under any kind of unnecessary pressure. And obviously, Colin Cowherd can say what he wants, and we don't control that. Not even Peace Mike can control what Colin Cowherd says, Colin. So there are limits to his powers. But is it helpful? Probably not. Are we absolutely in the dregs of summer when it comes to NFL news? Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a very interesting year, Stuart, because so many QBs had down years last year. Mahomes coming off a kind of a second down year in a row. So he'll be looking to, and obviously the Chiefs making a change at OC. Now Andy Reid is still there. We've made a change. Indeed, the entirety of the AFC West has at least new offensive coordinators. So interesting times ahead there. And one last little nugget, because you mentioned value, the Seattle Seahawks sold this week. I would dare say that the Broncos are probably a more valuable franchise, or in and around similar sort of value as the Seattle Seahawks, who sold for 9.6 billion. So I think it would be suffice to say that the Broncos are now worth north of 10 billion or thereabouts, 10-ish billion. So the Walter Penner Group making bank already on their investment. They can continue to do the field every season, Stuart, safe in the knowledge that there's and it's paying for itself. But let's move on to what you're interested in keeping an eye on in training camp, or is there anything in particular that is really kind of standing out to you as something you're intrigued to see how it goes?
Well, normally, all joking aside from earlier, Colum, I would actually be keen to see if Ellinger can push Stidham, because I do think backup quarterback, unfortunately, might be a more important position than it has been in the last couple of years since Bo arrived. Let's hope that we don't ever get to see Stiddy or Ellinger on the field in meaningful snaps during the regular season, but we might do. But I just think, given the amount of smoke that was blown towards Stiddy in the week leading up to the AFC Championship game, I think, given the amount of noise about Stiddy being able to start for any number of NFL teams, which we've seen is absolute hogwash, unfortunately. I just feel that Sean, who is a stubborn man, which is one of his great qualities, I don't see him being able to admit that Stidham is not as good as has been billed, and I don't see that battle actually being a genuine camp battle or going into the preseason. I think Stidham is your starter, is your backup, unless somebody decides to do something interesting by a trade, which I don't see, and I don't think we're going to cut him. So that's not really one that I even though I think it probably should be more important than it is, I genuinely just don't actually see anything happening there, Colin. I think if we were going to do something, we probably would have done it already. As I said before, I think there was a sort of a 5th round pick being mentioned as potentially something that could have got a Spencer Rattler across the line, which I absolutely would have done, but I'm not seeing it. So I think for me, Colin, the real key, and I do think this is something that we've touched on before, and I think this is something that we do need to keep an eye on, because I think Sean has been talking about Jahdae Barron again recently and how he's seen a market difference between years 1 and years 2 at this stage. Obviously, he was a rookie coming into the league last year. I think, and I do think it is something that we should. I mean, it seems a little harsh on Riley Moss, Colin, but I do think that Jahdae Barnes' progress is something that we need to keep an eye on, because I think it would be of benefit if Jahdae Barnes genuinely wins the job over Moss in camp, which would then, without preempting it too much, render Riley Moss very definitely a trade candidate. And you could probably get something useful for Riley Moss. Obviously, you're not going to be looking at a fourth or a fifth. You should be, I would have thought, at the minimum looking for a third for Riley Moss, Colum. So I would let's see how it goes, because Jahdae Barnes was very highly touted coming out of college. In fairness, he was one of, if not the best cornerback in the draft, or up at the top end of cornerbacks in that draft. So I think if he can win that job, as I said, then that is something that does have quite a lot of knock-on effect, because then you're, as I said, you would probably be tempted to trade Riley Moss, in which case then Macmillan is the one who's going to get the extension, which I think should happen anyway, because look, I'm a huge Macmillan fan. I think he's really had to fight and scratch and earn everything he's gotten, as has Riley Moss, to be fair. But that, I think, would be the one I would look out for the most, I think, which would be followed by, I'd have a bit of a passing interest in the tight ends column. I think Justin Joly is somebody who hopefully will be able to push on, although I do think, as we've discussed previously, tight end is a notoriously difficult position to play in the NFL as a rookie. Obviously, you're kind of getting some sort of freaks like Loveland and Bowers are changing the narrative there a little bit, but these guys were picked at the higher end of the first round for a very good reason. Jolie is a fine tight end, but he's not really in that sort of bracket of class, let's be brutally honest. But I think if he can do something for us, that could be interesting. It might mean that perennial or potential camp darling Caleb Lohner isn't keeping up his end of the bargain. But that's, we'll come back to Caleb later, I imagine. But I think for me, the other really interesting position battle to keep an eye on, Colum, is obviously who's going to be the sort of the partner to Nick Bonito, because as of yet, Jonathan Cooper is still on the Broncos roster, and there doesn't seem to be any kind of movement there. There's a court case, I think, but it's been pushed to, at some point, I think, next year. So there kind of really is no reason as to why the Broncos can cut Jonathan Cooper, even if they wanted to, because he hasn't been found guilty yet, and you do have to go through the whole process. And again, I'm being slightly wary of how much I talk about this, because this is an ongoing legal issue, and you need to be wary of how much we get into this. But Jonathan Cooper is still on the Broncos roster, Colin. Now it could be fast track. The league might want to step in, but the league haven't stepped in yet, and I do think normally they tend to get in quite quickly. So, we will see. All the signs point to the fact that Jonathan Cooper is going to be there on the 31st of July when we start. There's been nothing really said about it. Mike Kliss talked about it about a week ago. There has really not been any kind of significant update there. But it's probably no harm to see what happens behind Jonathan Cooper. And you're looking at Ellis, you're looking at Robinson, who has had quite a lot of hype going into this camp. And we'll see if it's been justified. Obviously, Robinson was very good on special teams last year, Colin. He flashed very occasionally. Obviously, I think he had that sack of Josh Allen in the divisional round, which I think seems to have spun people's minds out of control a little bit. So we'll see. But Vance Joseph seems to rate him highly. So we'll see if Robinson can push on. Because he has the tools and he does have a burst. We'll see if there's much else behind that. But they would probably be my main three. But I of all of them, Colin, and I think that's why I mentioned it first, I do think Barron's potential improvement is the one that we need to keep a close eye on. Because, as I said, it does kind of impact where the team goes. So I had to make a prediction. I would predict that Barron will win that cornerback 2 job ahead of Riley Moss. And I think Moss might well be cut. Sorry, not cut, might well be traded before the season starts. And Macmillan will get he'll get the first big contract extension.
Very interesting to see. I think it would take a sizable offer for them to do it, given injuries. But, we do know George Payton does love a pick. And I think some of it may come down to the Cooper piece, because, that is, and it's a, the Broncos have been put in a position. Obviously, look, the Lions made a decision that they were going to move off of Arnold, even though his case hadn't been heard. And I suppose a lot comes down to, to that, and what the Broncos want to do and how they feel. And there's all sorts of things to weigh up here, and there's obviously the presumption of innocence, but how and probably people won't care, right? Because all an awful lot of people only care about results and winning, and if a player plays well, then what they get up to off the field doesn't seem to really matter. But I would have to say, it would leave a little bit of an aftertaste for me, Stuart, if given like, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice and whatnot. If that is the big piece, but it is a piece the Broncos obviously have got to get figured out now, and the case being, like, it was scheduled to take place this week. That would have forced things, I suppose, to happen. No longer. So we shall see. That very much is one of the questions, and almost a sword of Damocles that hangs above the Broncos as they head into training camp. On the tight end, Stuart, I agree in terms of it generally, does take time. I just think our tight end room is so bad. I think anyone coming in there, and I think there's clearly a recognition, because actions speak louder than words, and you don't draft, even though you're taking them late, you don't draft 3 tight ends in 2 drafts if you're happy with the room. Now, they gave guys contracts. I don't see, really what a lot of the guys bring to the table. So we'll see if any of the rookies can show anything. But I think there's an opportunity there. It's difficult given the position, but really, when you look at it, it's not like any of them have a history of doing anything with the Broncos that would make you go, that you could point to and say, remember that, and that's why we need to keep him on the 53. So I think that is definitely up for grabs. And I suppose the other, like, there's a I think there are significant questions, going into this season on defense, Stuart. The Wickersham piece, I think, was Sean, because Sean Payton ultimately would have had final sign off on that, right? And I think that's Sean putting Vance on notice, the fact that the piece opened up with them talking about the defense and how poor the defense had been, the drop off. I think there are questions around who's the interior linebackers. I think there's questions around the backup safeties. I think there's questions obviously around replacing John Franklin Myers. There's obviously the Cooper question. There are an awful lot of questions that you prefer not to be in, because we've talked about it time and time again, and trying to maintain defensive stability is difficult. So I think that is a piece to see if there's anyone who emerges, and Red Murdoch, we'll see. A Mr. Irrelevant, but the piece is that he's certainly going to be thumping people. It's wear those Guardian caps in training camp, but what he offers you, Stuart, hopefully, and what's been missing, for as good as this defense has been. and ultimately it's what won us the Bills game. But it is a team that has struggled with takeaways, and takeaways at the biggest moments at times. Now, look, J Mac coming up with it against the Bills. You kind of end the season and people remember that. But there are plenty of other times, and that is, I think, one of the quintessential differences between this, like last year's defense and the Super Bowl 50. And I mean, as it turned out, like there was substantial, but one of the main ones was that Super Bowl 50 winning defense, the ability to get turnovers, to knock the ball out. We have nobody with the sort of pick six ability of Aqib Talib. He was a special player in many respects, and his ability to do that was quite something. But we need more interceptions, and we need more forced fumbles. So that is a piece that I'm interested to see how they go about that. Anything you want to add in on anything there?
Yeah, obviously, Colum, I think two things. One, I'm not entirely convinced about. The other one I am. Hopefully Davis Webb play calling can unlock Evan Ingram for the Broncos and maybe get him back, if not to his best, at least to something that he had shown as a New York Giant, because he was a special player in the position a few years ago, Colum. I don't know if it can happen. I think there's probably a better chance of it happening with Davis Webb than maybe there was under Sean Payton, Colum. I'm not convinced, but it at least there's a puncher's chance of it happening. The obvious one, which I guess it's almost like it's so obvious that we haven't talked about it yet, is to see just how good Jalen Waddle looks in this offense. Because, we've gotten that elite playmaker that we sort of had been pining for so long for the Broncos to out and get weapons for Bo Nix, and it seemed like they weren't going to, and then they delivered. Because obviously we had that rather bizarre free agency period where we brought everybody back, despite evidence to the contrary on some of them that really oughtn't to have happened. Adam Troutman, I'm looking at you, but then we went out and we made that blockbuster move. So I'm really looking forward to seeing Waddle, Colum. I hope Waddle is catching lots of passes from Bo Nix as opposed to catching passes from Stiddy and Ellinger. But I think that's something to be excited about. I do think it's been some time, Colum, since we had a player quite like this. We've obviously had some excellent offensive players in the last few years. Obviously, Cortland Sutton has been a mainstay of this team. But when you really think about it, we haven't signed them as free agents, but the likes of, say, Jerry Jeudy, Hamler, people like that, they have disappointed for a variety of different reasons, and we've gone a different route to get Waddle. But I think he's going to be absolutely sensational in this Broncos offense, and I think he's got that yak ability that we kind of have been pining for. When you think about it, that's not really something that any Broncos receiver or including, say, running backs or tight ends, that we've really flashed. Like Cortland is a go up and get it guy, but Cortland's not going to break a sort of a slant route 60 yards and take to the house. It just doesn't really happen, and that's something the offense has lacked a little bit of in the last couple of seasons. So I think Waddle is exactly that. If you look back at his tape, Colum, and it's because it happened so long ago. It's almost like I think we all went back and looked at Waddle's tape, and when you consider the kind of quarterback play that he's had to suffer, let's be honest, suffer is the right word. There's literally no comparison between him, the likes of Tua and Bo Nix. Bo Nix is a vastly superior quarterback, despite what some GMs will probably try to tell you in the next couple of weeks. So you can only be but hugely excited about what Waddle can do for this offense. And that to me is something that I know it's almost like obvious to say, but I think it's worth saying because I think he could be a real spark for this team. And let's be honest, Colin, the offense hasn't really been holding up its end of the bargain the last couple of years. I think we kind of gave it a little bit of a pass because Bo Nix was a rookie 2 years ago, but it doesn't get a pass now, and it didn't get a pass last year. It improved towards the end of the season when Nix began to settle, but then, of course, unfortunately, J.K. Dobbins got injured. So there's weapons now in lots of different places. We should have a proper run game now because we've got the insurance of Coleman. So I would I don't think it's going to become the greatest show on turf, Column. It's not going to be the the Broncos, on the year when they went and repeated, where they were just dismantling teams left, right, and centre. But it really should be pushing towards getting into the top half of NFL offenses this season. And if we can do that, and if the defense doesn't lose too much, because I think it's reasonable to expect it to lose one or two things because we have lost some key pieces. But if the drop off isn't huge, then I think we could be in with a real chance. But yeah, Waddle is somebody that I think we need to keep an eye out for, because he should be a real exciting get for this team.
You gave me a jump scare there with the mention of KJ Hamler, Stuart. Oh my goodness. There truly is a name that I had forgotten, and a name like, and maybe it was that it was in the midst of COVID, but that the hype that 2020 draft class got, that was quite something. Judy, I've never seen the reaction to like running in the playground videos quite like Judy got. KJ Hamler, Michael Ujamudia, Cushenberry, who proved to actually be a decent player and then got a massive contract, obviously. McTelvin Ajim, Alberto, or I mean, remember Alberto and the inability of commentators to pronounce his surname, but also like massive hype. Justin Stranard is the guy who's obviously still around. Moody, who was the one of the strongest man in the world, it would have you believe, when he was taken. And then the two 7th round guys. I mean, wow, truly we live in better times. So things can and have gotten much better, and for that let's all be very thankful for Sean Payton. As stubborn as the old goat can be at times, he has transformed this franchise from where it was. Oof.
Wow, that was quite the list, Colin. I'm not going to lie to you, I didn't really enjoy that as much as perhaps you thought I might, because so basically Justin Stranard in Denver and Jerry Jeudy to a point in Cleveland are really the only two players that have contributed anything for an entire draft class.
Cushenberry as well, I guess. From he's still the starting center, isn't he? Isn't he the starting center at Tennessee, right? Now whether he's still there this year or not, I don't know, but I believe so. But 3 out of an incredibly hyped, and remember, Stuart, when Jerry Jeudy went, there were the hype that surrounded him at the time, and he's had one season, where he Stuart Cushenberry signed with the Bills. He's on a 1-year contract with the Bills. He was released by the Titans, so he signed with the Bills in March. So the Titans decided they had signed into a 4-year contract. Now, that another example of one of those like free agent contracts that gets hyped up. So you always look at that. But that is that was an interesting one. So he played 8 games with them in 2024, and he played 15 games last year. And obviously, they were under the worst coaching regime, which was a really strange one, because their offensive line coach was much hyped, and obviously just it never ever worked out. I think they're going to be one of the teams that will be interesting to see. It was Brian Callahan and his father who were there, but I think it will be interesting to see how they get on, because they're a team who have obviously in Cam Ward, a player with the physical tools, but he appears to have the same sort of attitude as Drew Lock had. So let's see how that goes. Stuart, that's
I'm guessing, Colum. If now I don't know if you're going to be able to find this on the hoof, but I'm guessing were you to go back and get those beloved draft grades for that particular class, I'm guessing you're going to see a lot of B pluses, A minuses, A's, and you might even see an LA plus thrown into the mix as well, which surely has to be the death knell for any kind of seriousness that's paid towards draft grades and their utter pointlessness.
So just to say, Pro Football Focus, when that was a thing, I know obviously a husk of what it was. Pro Football Focus gave the 2020 class an A plus. They opened it with the fact that Denver didn't have to give up additional draft capital and trade up to land Jerry Jeudy is absurd. They
know.
NFL.com gave it an A, right? And the Washington Post gave it a B. Okay. Front office executive. Interesting, they didn't call him general manager. John Elway did all he could to help QB Drew Lock. Well, Drew refused to help himself there, so there was that. Sporting News gave it a B plus. The Broncos did a good job of addressing needs for John Elway and Vic Fangio, and Established the Run gave it an A. And they also not only did they love, and they weren't alone in this, not only did they love the draft picks, they also loved the pickup of AJ Bouye. Remember him? Oh man, there were lads in Denver, ball knowers, filmies, who were telling you that AJ Bouye was going to be the absolute stud in a Vic Fangio defense, and Vic Fangio was going to unlock him. And just you watch, wait and see. And he was one of the lads who got popped for PEDs and was going to sue. But strangely, we are, a number of years on from that, almost coming up on 5.5 years now. And I have not seen a lawsuit on that, but maybe I just have missed it. So, these things slip through the cracks sometime. But there you go, Stuart. Enormously positive.
Wow. Well, I'm color me surprised, Colum. Color me surprised. So look, definitive proof should it be required at this stage that draft grades are preposterous, and if you want to have a draft grade, it should only be done the year after the draft happens. That is the only time when you should ever draft a grade. Grade a draft.
3 years.
I'm not even speaking any. I'm so annoyed by draft grades. I'm speaking gibberish. So yeah, there you go. Look, minimum of a year, probably 2, and ideally 3.
Stuart and I will be back in a few weeks. I will be off around Norway, and the Broncos don't go into camp until the 31st of July. So we'll be back the week after that to see how things are going. Keep an eye on the media hype.
You've somehow managed to worm your way through a 43-minute podcast without predicting who you think the Broncos camp darling is going to be. Favorite call.
The thing about it is it's always somebody who you least expect. That's the beauty of these things. So I could give a prediction, Stuart, but I suffice to say I do not have my finger on the pulse of the Denver media. So we'll see. I'm wondering if it will end up being one of the defensive pieces. I think there's a few there in Miles Scott, in York, and in Red Murdoch who give them plenty.
It's going to be Q Robinson, guaranteed. He's
You might, yeah,
could.
Yes, that's true. There is.
I would bet anything on that call. Perhaps from an offensive point of view, it will. I think it's Caleb. I do. I think Caleb is going to be Camp Darling, and then Caleb is almost certainly going to go back to the practice squad for the entire season. That's my prediction on offense. On defense, it's going to be now. There could be, you might get a bit of Tyler Onyedem, you might get a little bit of Savion Jones, which is understandable because there's a glaring hole there where Franklin Mars used to be. But I think all signs are trending towards Q Robinson. And given the situation with Cooper, given the fact that he's already gotten a fair bit of airtime from Vance, and I think from Sean, but particularly Vance, I think that quote, as he looks like a starter out there, seems to have been taken as gospel. And I think people have run with that. So my prediction is Q Robinson on defense and Caleb Lowe on offense. And you have to make a prediction. Come on, you're going on holidays for 2 weeks. Leave the listeners with something. God damn it.
Well, you've pretty much stolen my thunder on that one, really. As I said, I think maybe I wouldn't be surprised if one of the rookies ends up getting enormous hype, right? Particularly on defense. They'll make a big play, and I do think, given the situation, right, with the interior linebackers, there's potentially a spot up for grabs there, potentially even start. Like, could you push? I know Alex Singleton is beloved by the coaching staff, but the man is turning 33. So I would not be surprised to see them. Now, I think Red Murdoch is almost too obvious, right? Because I don't think of as that he could be the fan darling, absolutely, right? Because
I think Red Murdoch is one decapitation attempt away from becoming a Broncos camp darling for sure. And hey, you know what? I'm all for it, Colum. I'm rooting for Red. I really am, and there's no cynicism there at all. I want Red Murdoch to clip somebody mid-training session and get into a massive fight, and then I think that's exactly what I'm looking for from my inside linebacker.
I think only so that's what I think. There are two things. I think there's the fan camp darling and the media camp darling. So I think Red could be a fan camp darling, and I get why. I think on the media side of things, they'll seem to be more cerebral. So could it be Miles Scott potentially that they decide that they'll latch onto? Maybe. But look, we will see how this plays out after I arrive back in early August. You can find Stewart over on Blue Sky SRoach123. I am across social media at Colum from Cork. If you enjoy the podcast, please do rate, review, subscribe, or better yet, just tell a friend about us. All that remains to be said for right now is go Broncos.
Go Broncos.